What's going on, everybody? Thanks for checking out the Among the Ashes podcast tonight. We're your hosts, Wes and Chris. Well, here we are, the Season 2 premiere. It's going to be a banger, but before we get into that, we just want to take a minute and thank each and every one of you guys that have gone and listened to the show so far. Those of you guys that have subscribed and followed along, whether it be on YouTube or Spotify or Apple Podcasts, Amazon, iHeartRadio, all that good stuff, wherever you're listening, we just want you guys to know that we really, really appreciate that. It helps us, but not only that, it brings hope to us that we're helping somebody else through what we're doing. And that is our ultimate goal here, is to try to help somebody else along their journey in life by sharing your stories. So with that being said, let's get into Season 2 tonight. The first episode with Steven Seagull. It's on celestial mechanics. You may be asking, what is celestial mechanics? I can't tell you, but he does a great job of explaining it. And he also throws in some other Bigfoot sightings and cryptid sightings that he's seen in his 50 plus years on the earth. Go grab you a drink, grab you a snack, and let's get into tonight's episode with Steven Seagull. What's up, everybody? Thanks for checking out the Among the Ashes podcast tonight. We're your hosts, Wes and Chris. Chris, how's it going, man?
Doing good. How are you, Wes?
Doing good, man. You had a good, busy day today?
I did. Yeah.
You just going to say, yeah, you did?
Yeah. No, we put some asphalt down on our driveway, so it's been much needed.
Did it get all straightened out?
Yeah, I think it's going to be better.
Good deal. Update everybody on the puppies. What's going on with the puppies?
So we were actually able to give them all away. Found homes for all 8 of them. So that's pretty exciting.
I can't believe you took that dog's babies and got rid of them.
Yeah, I know she was real mad today. Like, she was looking at us just like really angry.
I bet she was. I bet she was all upset.
Yeah, she was real whiny.
And we had a boxer one time that went through what was called false pregnancy.
Mm-hmm.
I'd never heard of it before, but she would go from our bedroom to the living room, and she would take stuffed animals with her, and or house shoes or whatever. She would rearrange or would arrange them around her like they were feeding.
Yeah.
And was just mopey and all kind of.
Well, I was kind of hoping Dolly was going to be false pregnant for like the first month and a half, and then I realized when she had the babies, like, hey, this may be real. It was terrible.
I got you. Well, man, tonight we got a pretty interesting episode. We got Steven Seagull coming on. He's going to discuss celestial mechanics, possibly some Bigfoot, Dogman, orbs, and a black-eyed person. You ever heard of black-eyed kids?
I've seen a black-eyed person before, but I don't think it's the same thing.
Yeah, well, if somebody rings your doorbell and they've got black eyes, you don't open it.
Gotcha.
Yeah, so we'll leave that up to him to see if he wants to discuss that, but I know the main thing he wants to discuss is celestial mechanics and how it affects us, what it is. New topic to me. I'm very interested, so let's get into it. Steven, you there, man?
Yes, sir.
How you doing, brother?
Doing pretty good. It's raining out here.
Raining. So are you willing to say what state you're in?
Oh yeah, I'm up in the northern part of Wisconsin.
Wisconsin. Okay. All right. So we're way down here in the south. It is not raining here. It is hot and dry.
Yeah.
I guess
it's humid, so it feels wet.
Yeah, it feels wet outside. All my grass is brown. I made the mistake of cutting it last week and probably shouldn't have. So well, man, tell us a little bit about yourself. You say you're from Wisconsin. Just dive in, man. Who is Steven?
Well, Steven isn't my real name for obvious reasons, and I've had a pretty interesting life. Most of my life with unusual or supernatural events that take place, and I'm sure a lot of people out there have as well. I was born and raised in Chicago, and now I eventually had moved up here into northern Wisconsin, where I started getting into some cryptid encounters with Bigfoot and Dogman. And I don't know, there's lots of things going on today in this time that we're living in. And I'm just kind of witnessing a lot of things going along. And there's some important information I feel that the vast majority of people should know about, because the world we live in really isn't what we think it is. There's a lot more to it than what we can understand.
So let me ask you this. So how far back does these encounters or experiences go for you?
Well, I know a lot of people who are into that big time had been doing it for 40 years. And I started getting my encounters since 2018. And when I moved up here in 2019, it's been really steady till about 2023 when I kind of closed the door on that subject matter.
And
so I have a lot of information and unique evidence on that subject matter as well.
So what happened? What made you decide to close the door on it?
I will not talk about it directly. But what I will say is, um, dealing with cryptids, they're definitely not natural to us, not part of our everyday life. There's supernatural qualities with them. I also believe they have a high spirituality involvement as well. So when you're putting a lot of your focus and attention on that, because you know where your attention goes, your energy flows, you can be holding open a spiritual door. And sure, you're getting into, let's say, Sasquatch and all that. The more you get into it, the more you're focused about it, the more you think about it, the more it's in your life, the more you're going to end up having encounters because you're attracting that to you. This is how a lot of things work. And along with that, when you're holding open that spiritual door, other things can come through, things you would never wish to come through, and they will affect or become a part of your life. So I had to deal with that.
Yeah, so I'm
Yeah.
100% on board with that. So somewhere, I mean, I've had some weird experiences in my life and experienced some weird things, but um, somewhere probably about 2018, 19, for some reason, this whole topic kind of grabbed me. Me personally noticed the more I dove into this and researched and watched videos and things like that, I noticed things in my own personal life kind of going downhill, if that makes sense. So, just so you know, kind of where I stand, I don't know where Chris stands on it, but as far as Sasquatch or Bigfoot goes, I am I am not of the mind to think that they are 100% natural creatures. I would lean more towards Bigfoot possibly being, a true cryptid, as in, we had a guest on a few weeks back, Ryan Tremblay. Um, Mountain gorillas were cryptids up until, I don't know, what was it, the 60s or 70s. You know what I mean? So I could get on board with possibly Sasquatch being something that was in America or in the Americas, and possibly went, maybe not completely extinct, but went to the point that they're not seen readily. You know what I'm saying? Like there's so few of them that they're not seen every day, like, like normal animals would be. But I lean more to them being more spiritual, I guess, than physical. Um, as far as Dogman and all these other creatures that people are seeing, part of me wants to say it's hype, it's jump on the bandwagon, it's get me some attention, whatever. I don't know. But I'm also of the mind that, and I said this with Ryan, if there's 100,000 sightings this year of, let's just say, Dogman, in my personal opinion, would say 50,000 of those, half of them are people hoaxing. They just bandwagon. You know what I mean? They're just trying to get some sort of attention, some sort of something drawn to them. They like the topic. They like horror. They like werewolves, whatever. Then you take 50,000 of that, divide that in half, and you've got 25,000 that have misidentified something, a large wolf or a moose or something to that effect. Then you've got 25,000 people or so, and this is just hypothetical numbers, but just breaking it down, that have actually seen something legit. You know what I'm saying? Like something that they really cannot explain. They know what they saw. And those people are the ones who aren't so readily willing to talk about it. They're the ones that are not so ready, willing to go out and research and find, but they do find themselves engulfed in the topic. So, that's why I say I lean to them being more spiritual than physical. When you start talking about Bigfoot and cloaking and, like the Predator movies and things like that, it's like, okay, guys, look, you're going to have to get on one side or the other. Is it a physical creature or is it a spiritual creature? And if these things are real and these things are happening, I believe personally, number one, being that I'm a Christian, I believe the veil is thinning and we're getting closer to the return of Christ. There's things like CERN, them discovering the God particle, and making this particle accelerator to try to recreate life, opening portals, and I'm not just saying that there's portals out there everywhere, but I do think that they have messed with something that is a lot deeper than what they know. And therefore, it has allowed these creatures to cross over into our dimension versus staying in their own. I do believe that we are super, we are natural creatures living in a supernatural world more so than what we think we're living in a natural world. But I do think with the return of Christ, and Satan's just last push, I guess I would say, at trying to take over and keep his world, that may be why we're seeing what we're seeing.
Well, I mean, that's like when you read Revelations. I mean, most of the things in Revelation is supernatural at that point. I mean, like the locust and everything. So, I mean, I definitely agree with that.
Sure. So what's your take? I mean, like, how do you feel with that, Stephen? I mean, you more along those lines, or do you think that Sasquatch itself is something that is a super, or that is a natural being?
Well, I think you're hitting it really close. I like to stand on both sides of the fence and say that it's a supernatural being that can manifest in the physical flesh, just like an angel could.
And that's kind of that's what I think. I think in order to stay in this realm, they've got to be in a flesh and blood body. And the reason I say that,
just like us, because we're spiritual.
Right. And we wonder why people get possessed or the whole possession thing of human beings. Why do demons possess human beings? My personal opinion is because they want what we have. They want to be able to eat again. They want to be able to taste again. They want to be able to smell again. They want to be able to feel again and do everything that we can do naturally. And the only way they can do that is by inhabiting our bodies. And I'm along the lines, and I had a vision, or I say a vision, a couple of years ago, back when the dreaded virus came out, and I saw a war. And I shared this with Ryan, but I saw a war, and there's angels fighting against all these different cryptid beings, and I feel like the Lord spoke to me and was saying that these beings will be. And this is just my opinion, and I sound like a kook and a nut whenever I say this, but my opinion is these will be used by the Antichrist, in my opinion, to either beat us into submission and control us, or used by him to say, I'll protect you from them. Take the mark. If you have the mark, I'll protect you from these creatures, so to speak. That's just kind of my take on it and kind of where I go with it. Not saying it's right, but that's kind of where I go with it.
That's true. It's important to know too. Everybody does have a valid point in subject matters, but at the same time, we're just mankind. As far as what we know, we barely understand certain things. So, but it's a good assumption,
Yeah. So, so Bigfoot and Dogman encounters, whatever, you've been seeing that since, for the last 4 or 5 years, and it calmed down, with you just kind of backing away from the subject. You feel like that is the solution?
Well, the solution is always with Christ,
Sure.
Anything that you have, if you have any issues or problems, you could just be authentic yourself and pray to him and ask him for the answers of how to fix the situations, and a lot of times you just have to endure everything you endure. Like, I believe God is everywhere at the same time, all the time, past, present, and future. So he already knows stuff, everything. And he purposes every single, I don't believe in anything being coincidental. I believe it's purposed. And, if you're doing certain things and whatever, and now you're going through some tribulation and hard times, a lot of people, get upset over it or whatever, but that's the time period where he's trying to show you something, So I don't think accidents occur. I don't believe in coincidences or anything like that. He did give us a free will to make decisions and choices, but I think he guides us along the way, and that's why I believe everything's purpose. I believed encountering the Bigfoots, the black-eyed person, and coming across the knowledge that I have from other Christians on things that I did not experience is definitely highly purposed.
So I had a conversation with a family member yesterday, and it's kind of funny because I've been battling some stuff in my life pretty heavy lately, and I've been not questioning God, but questioning why, if that makes sense. And
Yeah.
I find myself whenever I'm in these deepest, hardest struggles, just ready to give up. You know what I mean? Like God, I can't take anymore. He brings somebody across my path that's struggling. And I had a conversation with a lady this week who said, I was scrolling through Facebook, and it was from Jonathan M's church, the Garbage Can, and she had posted on there about how she had been just a staunch atheist her entire life, and how she had watched the movie I Can Only Imagine, and how she, for the first time in her life, felt God reach down and grab her by the hand,
Yep.
And I commented on that, and the day before, like I was done, man.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And she and I got to talking back and forth, and she said, I'm just waiting for a show up and show out moment from God in my life. She said, the only reason I would have ever believed in heaven was to hopefully make it there, even if it was for judgment, so I could punch God in the face.
Yeah.
Like she was
that's
that far gone. And we began to talk, and this past week she sent me several messages, and hey, I finally surrendered to God. I finally gave my life to Christ. I finally am seeing God move. And she's 54 years old. And it's like, man, that's a lifetime of struggling and battling. And how do we overcome that? And why did God choose her to struggle for 54 years, but choose her in this moment right now? And I'm like you, Stephen, I don't believe in coincidences. You know what I mean? I believe whenever I am struggling the most, and I know this because it's happened to me 3 times this week, and I've talked to 3 different people, I've been to the point of giving up, like not wanting to live. And that's not me. You know what I mean? Like having thoughts of how far could I get before anybody could find me, or just taking myself out. And it's like, that's not who I am. Why am I feeling this way? Why am I struggling like this? And then I meet somebody who's struggling. So I think God definitely opens up doors in our lives through our situations if we're willing to look. It's just kind of crazy to me that God would want me to see a Bigfoot.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like to your point, I mean, maybe God's got you working out, so to speak. I mean, you're getting stronger every time you go through this.
No, that's right.
And I mean, so maybe that's got something to do with it too.
That's right.
And I will tell you this, I Can Only Imagine is like, I can't watch it, but like once every 3 years.
Yeah.
Like I can't. Like I can't. Because my mom died from cancer.
Yeah.
And so that movie just.
Yeah, it'll wreck you, man.
Yeah,
for sure.
It's crazy.
So Stephen, with the onset of seeing Bigfoot and Dogman and the black-eyed children, you think God had a purpose and a plan for you experiencing that?
Yeah, all these things that occur to us is for our developments to be delivered, and we're used to the worldly world, the carnal world that we live in through the flesh. So I mean, we're saturated in it, and most in it so bad that a lot of times it's hard to see spirituality because that's all we know is life. You have to feed yourself, you have to do all these different things. Like I had a pretty rough childhood. I would say other people had worse, but mine was pretty bad. And I resented a lot of things. And I went through a period of black hate for like decades, disowned family and everything. And it just got to a point where I just was sick of being like that. And that's when, the ultimate question came up, why am I here? I will not ever change anything that's ever happened to me in my childhood and that came from a loving mother, um, I would never change none of that because it made me who I am today. And the good Lord bless, myself with having to go through all those troubles. There's people who today, living right now that dodged a lot of those things, and you can dodge them. But there's a time coming where everyone's going to have to go through those things, and they're going to take took me, I'm 58 years old. It took me this long to get where I'm at. These people are going to have to experience lifetimes of stuff in possibly like an hour's time when everything comes unhinged. So I really feel for those kind of people who haven't went through things. And another big misconception too is people think like if they believe in religion and spirituality, they believe Satan is running around unchecked and is destroying people's lives, and you have to fight him and this and that. I'll tell you right now, the good Lord runs everything that he creates. There's nothing that happens without his consent. So if Satan's a part of your life, he put that into your life. The good Lord did to show you something. And he also knows. You mentioned a lot about that yourself and that lady. You just feel like giving up. And a lot of people had these thoughts of suicide and this and that. The situation is that God will never put onto you more than you can handle. And we think we can handle so much, and it goes to show how much we know, because he knows how much we can handle. And it makes us feel like we just got to give up. We can't do it anymore. But you just got to have that faith that he knows what he's doing.
That's exactly right. And that's part of the conversation I had with a family member yesterday. He said somebody had presented, well, he had an opportunity to witness to a guy that actually had a tattoo of Baphomet on his arm.
Yeah.
And a female, I said was probably maybe Lilith, and then some other things at a doctor's office. The guy was a doctor of all people, and opened up a door for him to be able to share about it. And he said, it's not the doctor said, it's not that I don't believe there is a God. He said, I just don't understand why and this is the same question that was posed to me by this lady. If God loves us, why does he allow bad things to happen? And he said, take the little girl in Florida who lost her arm and her leg. And he said, I do understand there was a doctor on scene that saved her life and all that, but why didn't God prevent that shark from biting her? And I said, well, you got to look at it this way. In my opinion, number one, that shark, it's not its fault. It's doing what it does. It lives in the ocean. It's cruising the ocean. It's looking for food. I would dare say if you met that little girl or talked to that little girl, she would say somewhere in that day, something checked her and said, I probably don't need to go in the water today. But she did anyway.
Mm-hmm.
And God, knowing her decision, had the foresight to have a doctor there that saved her life. So instead of seeing God as the big mean bully on an anthill with a magnifying glass waiting to burn off our feelers, he's saying, I know the decisions that you're going to make beforehand.
Right.
And I'm going to try to warn you and try to keep you out of it. But even if you do fall into it, I'm going to provide a way out or a way of protection or a way of help.
Yeah.
Some way, form, or fashion. And we tend to blame God more than we do looking at all of the provision that he provides for our stupid mistakes. You know what I mean? Do I wish Adam, and Eve had never fallen? Sure. But had they never fallen, we may never be here.
That's right.
We may never get to experience the things that we get to experience, So, but anyway.
And to Stephen's point, I mean, Stephen, I've never looked at it that way, but like you were saying, we go through things, but we go through things in seasons, at different times in our life. And you're right. I mean, if somebody had never went through anything and then all of a sudden everything just hit them at one time, I don't even know. Like,
absolutely.
I don't know how they would handle that, and maybe that's what happens to some people.
You have to have
but I've just never really thought of it like that. So that was a good point.
I was just gonna say, our armor, the armor of Christ or whatever, holy armor we're supposed to be wearing, the helmet of salvation and shield of faith and all that stuff. I mean, that's all designed to move forward. There's no butt plate armor or anything from behind. We're supposed to move forward.
Yeah.
And through all our tribulations and things that we learn, if we have that surrender, then we can understand things better. Just like death. The good Lord holds the keys to hell and death, right? Because Christ died and went the hell and found with no sin, and he conquered that. So I don't believe in accidental deaths. Someone who dies in a car accident, it's an accident. Everything is highly purposed. And we as humans, spirituality, we can be pretty smart on how things are, but just living in this world and trying to even understand God. I think God even mentioned somewhere in the Bible, don't even try to understand me to that extent, because we can't even fathom or understand it. And so, here we are. Oh, he died for this reason. Maybe it's because he was bad, and all these bad scenarios develop out of it, like judging people and whatnot, it's crazy how it's all really set up if you could see it, and that's why it's best to have Christ, have a good communication with him, and have the faith and belief in all that. And sure, it doesn't mean that you're going to escape hard times. And like I said, you go to a gym to work out, you want to build up muscle mass, you're going to have to feel some pain,
Yep.
to get to that goal. It's the same scenario.
You're exactly right. I'm a firm believer nothing happens by accident, just like you said. And as far as accidental deaths, things like that, to my knowledge, the only thing that the Bible says that can add to or shorten the days of your life is honoring your parents. You know, um,
Yeah.
and I believe we can prematurely end our own lives if Satan does that. But beyond that, if you live your life and you're living it the way you're supposed to do, and you pass away, I believe he's finished with your work.
But but also honoring father and mother, that gets into a gray area as well.
Well, within, I'm not talking about honoring them if they're mistreating you, immorally and things like that. But if they're being parents like they're supposed to do, then we're supposed to honor our parents. You know what I mean? And that's for our entire lives.
Well, the only reason I say that is our pastor the other day brought it up, and he was talking about it like they were talking about it kind of in a small group setting, but essentially like what if your parents aren't Christians? What if they're a different religion, so to speak? And then he's like, well, do you have to honor them then? Like as far as, so that gets kind of,
I believe you should honor them as your parents, maybe not as far as following the wrong religion or the wrong morals. But anyway, that's my opinion. So anyway, we can keep chasing that rabbit. That's not what you're here for, Steven. So before we move on, do you want, are you willing or would you like to share any of your sightings as far as the Bigfoot, the Dogman, or the black-eyed person goes? I would really like to hear the black-eyed person one personally, but if you're not willing to share that, you feel like it's going to open up a door to you, to us, or to anybody listening, then absolutely not.
Well, we can talk about those things. I'm going to approach it in a spiritual manner because then this is not what I used to do. It's more of learning or teaching other people about certain aspects of that, So I think we could do that by changing the foundation of the subject matter,
Sure.
So which one do you want to hear? I can give you one of my best encounters, I guess, with it involves one Sasquatch that was with 3 dogmen. So up here, obviously, there's a lot of hunters, and I like hunting, deer, venison for food. And this was in the spring of 2020. And to give you an idea, where I live is in the national forest. So I have woods that back up all the way around the house 360. I could drive 30 minutes to my job and still never leave the forest. Behind the house, about 10-minute walk, is a river that I go to. And they have a small area they logged out, real small, in the forest, where I can go and see better on the ground because there's pine needles and all kind of debris, and tracks out in the open where things were disturbed were easier to see. So this was in the springtime. So black bears are pretty populated with their cubs, and that's one thing I don't want to get in between is a mama bear and her cub, So I would walk for a while and I would stop and scan the area. And I was doing this through the woods up until I got near the river where this clearing where the forest was, and it's a small clearing. But as soon as I approached the wood line going towards the clearing, and I'm looking for game trail tracks and stuff like that, I don't have nothing in my mind about cryptids or anything like that. So I get to this opening and I'm looking around, and all of a sudden, something supernaturally extraordinary happens to me. And I would want to say that I felt it was the Holy Spirit. But in this cryptid subject matter, there's a lot of people who encountered these cryptids, and they talk about having mind speak, like Sasquatch would mind speak to that person, and telepathy, But it was hard at first for me to determine, but after I analyzed everything, the experience in my mind, I really do feel it was the Holy Spirit because of how everything took place afterwards. So I got up to this clearing and I'm looking around, and all of a sudden it felt like something swooshed over my head, like faintly. I can't even tell you what that was, but there was an awareness of like this over my head. And it wasn't a voice, but it was like a knowing that it didn't say anything. It was just a knowing that something is over here to my left. And in the middle of thinking about deer and stuff, that happened. And I was thinking, what? Why did I think of that? And then in the middle of saying really in my head before I got to the end of really, all of a sudden that happened again, and it happened really strong. Something is right over there to your left. So this is taking on something unusual. So I became really aware and super focused on what was going on. And I looked over towards my left. And in the tree line, I seen something dark kind of crouched down, and I couldn't make out what it was. And I was thinking, well, maybe it's, a bear. And maybe my sixth sense picked up and was telling me there's a bear over there. So at this point in time, I had to make a decision on if I should go check this out or if I should just turn around and go back home. And I came finally to the conclusion that it'll drive me nuts if I went home, and I should just check it out. So I wasn't stupid about it. I didn't walk straight up to where that was. I walked out into the clearing, and I pretend like I didn't see it, like I didn't know it was there, and I kept it in my left peripheral vision. And what I was doing was meandering around. I would stop, pick stuff up off the ground, being nonchalant, and I would work my way closer to that area. And the whole time I'd keep things in my peripheral off to my left. When I figured I got close enough, I did take a look, and I could see there was something very black and shaggy, just sitting about 40 feet away from me. And there's some things that you have to know when dealing with things that are not normal or supernatural or cryptid wise, I would say, is you could look at something, let's say a dogman, and you could think in your head, you could look straight at a dogman, a real live one, and your brain will process that's a bear, because your brain can't handle or conceive something like that. I've seen how that happens several times. But in this case, I was already a little bit experienced in that. And so I just stayed safe. I know one thing you cannot do, I've heard, because I did a lot of Bigfoot and Dogman research prior to all these experiences, is you don't hold a camera up to your face to take a picture of stuff, right? Because it looks like you're doing one of these with a rifle, and they know what that is. So under this situation, I have to say, I don't even understand how I was smart enough to figure this out, but I decided to walk and find, because we're in the woods, I'm trying to find a landmark where I know exactly where this took place, but I wanted a really precise landmark. And I saw a row of birch trees, like pretty wide, and some behind it that went in, and then right behind that was where this black thing was. So I'm like, okay, this is a perfect position. I'll take a photo here. I pulled my camera out and I ran it up the side of my body. So it was against my body. So it didn't look like I was taking a picture. And I snapped one off. I didn't even know if it would be square or level or anything. It was just in the moment out in the woods. Later on, when I went back, I viewed the picture. And when I seen what I saw, I instantly thought, oh, that's pareidolia. That's not what it might be. But then after I got
explain pareidolia for everybody who doesn't know what that is. Essentially, that's when
your mind, yeah, you can look up in the clouds and see faces and different things and objects and stuff, and it's that that's not really there, but it looks like that. And our mind is the way our brains are set up is everything that you see, because visual is one of the big senses we have. Your brain's already calculating and figuring out shapes and dimensions of things, and they correlate together so that you can get an understanding real quick of whatever you're looking at, what it is. And when you start looking at things that are in that paradigm in your mind, then you start getting into what could be pareidolia or whatever,
Gotcha.
So that happens to be a lot of issues. Plus, too, everyone has different perspectives. I've posted pictures. I don't have to circle my pictures to show people where they are. They can see them clear as day. But other people, for the life of them, cannot see the pictures until I actually outline the whole thing. Then they can see it. And it's not like they're not believers or anything. It's just their different way of perceiving things, you know.
Sure.
Me and you could look at the sky and we could say it's blue. And I could say it's like cobalt blue, and you could say it's a royal blue. You know, I mean, it is what it is. But where the heck was I? So anyway, I looked. So pareidolia, a lot of people are non-believers in this because they just can't conceive the concepts of such. They throw that title pareidolia on a lot of stuff, you know. But you know, that's kind of like what I thought when I viewed the picture at first, because that, you know, goes to show your mind's not like some people. If they've seen these things flat out and they don't believe them, I would not be surprised if they died on a heart attack right on the spot, you know, because it's just way too much for your mind. I mean, many things I've encountered or seen, I am pretty open minded and I can absorb, but some of the effects, I would get a numb face for a while, for a couple hours. And, you know, like the rest of the world doesn't exist because your mind's just ringing from the information you just absorbed, you know. So it is totally a different way of experiencing existence here. But back to the photo, after I watched many more shows on YouTube or whatever about, you know, cryptids and stuff, then I remember that photo and I went and looked back at it. And instead of seeing pareidolia and thinking it was a bear, when I looked at it, I'm like, oh my God, that's not a bear, because I could see the two top pointy ears of a dogman that was crouching down. When I really went into analyzing the photo, I did it through different filters, white and blue, to pull out more detailed, because this dogman that I took a photo of, it was jet black. And even looking at it with your eyes, the edges of it were blurred because of the way the hair was.
Mm-hmm.
Like some of the hair on a buffalo is so black, you could shine a flashlight at it and it'll absorb the light.
Right.
You know, so that's kind of like the effect that this has just on regular visual with your eyes. And then you can only imagine through a digital camera how that would be. But considering it all, I had some really good photos that a lot of people said I had, you know. And in that photo, when you zoom in, this dogman that was in this picture, she was about 4.5 feet tall, crouching down. She was more of a basketball athletic built versus like a bodybuilder or whatever. And she was looking kind of straight at me with her head down slightly. And she was near trees, and behind one of the birch trees that she was by, you could see the her hand wrapped around the back of it. And it's not a paw, it's an actual hand. When I zoom in on it, you could see the actual fingers and the claws on there. So I mean, this is the real deal. Then when I posted that picture up on the internet, there was some lady, I could use her name because she mentioned that I could. Her name was Robin McCrae, and she's a phenomenal energy reader person. You know, she has some kind of special gift or skill. But she put it out to me that near the dogman was a baby dogman, where you could see it 4.5 feet up a tree, and you could see its head peeking around. You could see the eyeballs and the nose and everything. That was jet black. And I'm like, oh my gosh, you know. And then that's when she told me that's probably a female dogman that you took a photo of, you know. So then after that, I went looking through the photo everywhere in that picture. And right behind the baby dogman was a male dogman that was built kind of like a Schwarzenegger, you know, figure. His face, though, this is kind of strange. The baby dogman's face is the only one that you could see outright in the photo. The female dogman, coincidentally, which I don't believe, has a birch tree branch real thinny that covers both of her eyes. Then the male dogman is behind a tree and his face is covered, but you can see his big chest and shoulders, and you can see the arms coming down and a hand on one of them. Then behind that dogman was the Sasquatch that was with that group. And it was a conical head type Sasquatch. You could see the wrinkles in its forehead. It didn't look kind of happy. It seemed like it was ducking its head away down like this. and its arm is up on a branch. But they're all together in this group that I had this encounter with that weird supernatural. Uh, I believe the Holy Spirit was telling me something was over there. The strangest thing, the whole time I was there, none of these things moved. They were like statues. This is another reason why I believe this was a spiritual thing that occurred to me because of that. What I believe was the Holy Spirit talking to me. I think something was being shown to me during this period of time. And I didn't stop investigating the photo with just four cryptids that were in there. As I kept looking around, I've noticed strange faces and weird things in the photo that were not normal in the woods, in our reality.
So do you think
And
that you could possibly have taken a photo into another realm?
you just nailed it, because one of the biggest things that I couldn't understand, I know that place because I've been back there thousands of times. I go back there so many times to track and just to hang out and do whatever, or on my way to the river. So I know the exact spot where I took the photo. And I find it funny that I made a land reference with woods in there to precisely be exactly where I would be. I went to that same place the next day because I figured I'm going to see tracks and all that. I have my phone out. I'm looking at the woods that were there where I had the encounter, and those woods don't even exist there. There's a whole different set of woods there, the normal woods that I'm used to. The
Wow.
woods that are in my photo do not match nothing in that area. I know like where rotted birch trees are, where fallen down trees are, all kinds of different little bits of information in my surroundings. And in this photograph, none of those woods match anything that I have back there. And I've
Wow.
went into a lot of exploration on that and on portals and whatnot. And there's a lot of information that states that an adjacent realm to ours within our dimension, I guess, has a lot of similarities. There's actually a YouTube video of a lady who got lost. She was with friends. There's three friends. She had three friends and herself, and they were all walking down a trail, and all of a sudden her friends in front of her disappeared. And she kept walking, and she was like, where'd they go? And she could see where their footprints stopped, but hers continued. And then she was in the same area where she was, but the path, she knew the path all the way down the walking trail where lakes and things were, and the trail was slightly different. Lakes were at places where they shouldn't be. Different things were in the woods that were never there. She even seen some strange orange-faced creature that was following her in the woods, and she had a 357. She shot a few rounds at it, became real hysterical. She had a dog with her. She ended up passing out in some area and waking up later on, still in that weird area. But eventually she found some road and everything started looking back to normal. And then she went to the nearest house and got help. And when they finally found her, the police were looking for her and stuff. And her friends, all of a sudden she was gone and they didn't know what was going on. But eventually she got out of whatever she went into, and they all correlated with the same information about how they lost each other. So
that to me lines up. I don't know, Chris, if you're familiar with David Paulides. Missing 411.
Oh yeah.
Basically, people go into these forested areas, Appalachian Mountains or national forest areas. They're hiking, whatever. The Appalachian Trail is a really big hot spot, and people will go missing, and they'll be missing for 4 or 5 days.
Yeah.
And then they turn up, and they don't realize they've been gone that long, but there's a full-on manhunt.
Is that kind of like Bermuda Triangle?
Yeah,
similar to that
yeah,
kind of thing?
It would kind of be the same thing. And some people, they find, some they don't, or they will find people's clothes folded neatly in an area that is not accessible by anybody. Like even mountain lions and stuff probably couldn't get to where they spot clothes from a helicopter or whatever. I mean, it's just crazy areas. For sure, a human being couldn't get up there without assistance. But yet their clothes are folded neatly, shoes stacked on top of their clothes. I mean, it's interesting. And then they find the people naked, You know what I mean? Or if they find them, it's pretty interesting. But yeah, I mean that all that stuff is kind of kooky and crazy. I mean, it definitely makes you sound like you're a nut job. But you know, if that's happened to you, you know what I mean? Like you can't tell me it didn't. You know what I'm saying?
That's right.
And I'm sure the same thing with you, Stephen. Like you couldn't, you know, in spite of what we sitting here think, you know what happened to you. You know what you've seen. You know what you've experienced.
That's true. That's why it can't be shaken. You know, I mean, people can say whatever they want, but I'm not here to prove things to everyone. Anybody that has a listening ear, though, I'd like to give them at least some information, and especially if it's something detrimental that could happen with them. You know,
Sure.
So
sure. I mean, there's so many things we don't know about this world already, and there's so many things we already can't see. I mean, so for you to tell me, oh, well, you know, I took a photo of a different realm or somebody ended up in a different, I mean, who am I to say yes or no? Because I mean, we don't know everything.
You know, it's easy for us to believe that somebody took a picture of a ghost.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Right.
But why not something like what Steven's saying here? Which is even crazier to me. It's like you can believe in that, but you can't believe in Christ. You can't believe in God.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I can go down that rabbit hole too. But anyway, so celestial mechanics, man. I mean, and unless there's anything else you want to talk about there, if you want to dive into celestial mechanics, man, tell us what that is and how it's affecting us, or how you believe it's affecting us.
Okay, so as far as celestial mechanics, to give a basic understanding for everyone to know, you have a sun, our solar system, and obviously the sun has a big play in, you know, having the Earth sort of, you know, sustain itself from the radiations of the sun, you know, the solar winds. Anyway, the energy that comes out of the sun currently comes out as like solar winds, but it is a form of radiation. All energy is a form of radiation. It comes out into the solar system 360. Our planet Earth has magnetic poles and a magnetic field. So that solar energy hits the magnetic field, it diverts it to the poles. The poles go down into the Earth. The core of the Earth has a lot of iron in it because a lot of rocks out in space are the same way. And we have iron in our blood. It's pretty interesting how that is. But that energy makes that iron spin. There's other smaller, different, you know, less amounts of metal in there, but that and magma, but that core spins. And then that's what gives the planet its rotation and everything else. Plus, with that core spinning, if you ever understand like the copper wirings around an alternator, by the core spinning, it creates an electric field, which is the magnetic field. So it's all a system that's been in place that's been running for thousands of years. The sun is acting different nowadays and it's getting a lot hotter and it's actually changing. The sun, when I was a kid, used to be yellow. Today it's platinum white. I mean, you could kind of glance at the sun when I was a kid, but today you could barely even look at it. You know, it's way different, super overactive. And I'll get into the ultimate question: why is the sun becoming overactive? But for now, with the way the thing I described to you how the design of our solar system is with the sun and our planet, and how the magnetic fields and the poles are. Um, Everybody's heard the term global warming, and they're saying that it's mankind and the pollutants and everything in there is what's causing this, but that's really not a truth. Um, One thing about the global warming is the stuff that since World War II, scientists had noticed that the sun has been getting warmer and warmer every year. So they started tracking that, and then they realized that it's going to become a severe issue. So you ever heard of the chemtrails they spray up in the atmospheres? It's that strontium, barium, and aluminum oxide, nanoparticles of metal. Well, this is one of the think tank solutions back in the day for having the earth not heat up so much. They're spraying that stuff in there to reflect a lot of that solar energy from the sun. That's one of the big reasons why they're doing it. So they know what's happening and what's going on. As of 2023 in the spring, because they've noticed this since World War II, and they have graph models of progression throughout time. Well, in 2023, against a computer model time that they suspect how things are going to turn out, things ramped up exponentially, and those models became 175 years redundant compared to what's going on now. So the amount of heat that's coming in, like last year, the Gulf of Mexico was 111 degrees in that ocean. A lot of the oceans are heating up. A lot of surface areas of the planets are heating up. Back then in May in 2023, there was 19,000 new volcanoes that became active and eruptive. Because now what's going on is all that extra energy that the poles, imagine when you're charging a cell phone, if you overcharge it, that battery gets real hot and it might even explode. Well, all this energy coming from the sun is superheating the interior of the earth. And magma and volcanic activity is coming around big time. Recently we had some volcanic activity out in Indonesia. But like I said, 19,000 new volcanoes came alive last year and still growing, is unprecedented. I even have a nice app that tells me live what status volcanoes are, the type of activities and whatever, volcanoes. It's a nice thing to have if you ever get a chance to download one. But so we're having an effect where all this radiation from the sun is hitting magnetic field and then it's weakening it big time. There's so many different things that could occur off of the magnetic field being weakened. We had that aurora borealis not too long ago that went really far south.
Yeah, we got some beautiful pictures of it. My daughter did, yeah.
That's one of the telltale signs that this field is weakening and that stronger energies are hitting our planet. So you got that, and what else we got?
While you're thinking on that, the funny thing about the day that happened, I was in Dallas, Texas, flying home, and I knew nothing about it. And everybody with us is like, "Man, let's rent a car and drive." I was like, "Why?" And they told me it's like it could affect the GPS and different things in the plane. It's like, well, if it's the Lord's time for me to go, I'm going to go. We tried to watch it from the plane and we couldn't see it. And as soon as I landed here in Birmingham, my daughter was at Smith Lake and she's sending pictures. And then I got home and I could see in the backyard here, Chris, just a halo of what you would have thought would have been the city of Birmingham lighting up, because you can kind of see the light pollution normally, but it was massive. I got a picture. I'll try to put it in this video. Some of the pictures.
Yeah, I was real upset because that's one thing I've always wanted to see, and I didn't even know about it.
Yeah,
and I went to sleep, and that was it.
I'll try to throw some pictures in this video for people to see. But anyway, sorry, Steven, didn't mean to cut you off there.
Oh, that's okay. Yeah, it was raining up here when that happened, so we didn't even get to see it as well. But some of the effects that happen from this global warming or for the sun being overactive is we're getting into new terminologies weather-wise. The same time I told you 2023 we had new volcano activity and the sun's heat went 175 years ahead of computer models. The weather started changing, and one of the terms is called atmospheric river condition. I don't know if you guys ever heard of that. Okay, so basically it's like your atmosphere can pour down, whether it's water or snow, like rivers just dumping. And in this case, Northern California had an atmospheric river condition. The first time they mentioned it on the news, that title, but they ended up getting, it was like over 700 inches of snow in a month's time. Like 3-story houses were buried completely. It was insane. And what's going on is, as all this solar energy is hitting our magnetic field, it's compressing all the different layers of our atmosphere. And it's giving it, right now, today, we could hold like 200 times more particulates in the air than we ever had before. Now, when you go into moisture, like with clouds and stuff, the clouds get bigger, the storm fronts are thicker and bigger. When you get to a cold and a warm front meeting, the isobars get packed even tighter in between, get stronger upstream. winds that could produce way bigger hail. There's a lot of like weather in the future, starting today, is going to become like man's worst enemy. Um, I've seen a lot of videos this year all around the world and in several parts of our country of mass flooding. Flooding out in Dubai, out in the Middle East in a desert. There's camels trying to swim in floodwaters. I mean, I never even imagined that could ever take place.
Yeah, that's
But
great.
yeah, it's amazing, and these are just the very beginning stages of what the sun is doing, because it'll get much worse. From what I understand, we're going to go through this process, and then we're going to have a lot of things migrating up north, insects and things, and because of, let's say, just with the atmospheric river conditions, the constant raining and the amount of rain coming down in some storm clouds, you could have the water drops actually be like a half a cup of water per drop. And you would like literally drown in a storm like that if you were outside. But when you get all that rain hitting the ground over and over and over again, you're going to end up having massive land degradations where you're going to have landslides, sinkholes, all kinds of stuff. There's uh, land plate drifting where you can see a whole subdivision just moving with the land, cruising somewhere else, settling down 15, 20 miles from where it originally was. Um, there's just all kinds of different effects that could occur from just, everything is a part of a system, and one part of the system, like the sun, goes out of whack, all the rest of the systems are going to follow suit.
So what you're saying here, essentially is this is something that's happening naturally with the sun, not something that is being done by man.
Exactly. Because here's the key ticket. They say we're having global warming because of all the pollution that we create in the world. 1 hour of a volcano exploding, discharging all the ash into the atmosphere, can equal 10 years of man's worst kinds of pollution.
Wow.
So that has nothing to do with that. Secondly, last time I checked, there was no cars or manufacturing plants or things like that on Mars or Pluto or Jupiter. And all those planets are also going through the same global warming as we are. They're all changing. The surface of those planets are changing. They got great storms on them too. They're heating up just as well. So this has nothing to do with us. And that's why anyone who understands celestial mechanics or even astronomy, they will be able to see signs of other planets changing along with ours.
So that's interesting. I would be hard pressed, I guess, to maybe get in scripture and see if I can find anything.
Well, that's what I was actually thinking as he's talking about the storms getting worse and getting, I'm like, well, that, the Bible does mention that. So
if you read Revelations, it'll give you a lot of descriptions of what's going to happen on this planet, because they talk about every green grass and tree and things burnt up. And in the book of Enoch, it mentions the same thing, right?
Sure.
And from the information that I'm getting, it parallels it to a T. You can't even walk and find shade, comfort and shade, and you can't even walk out with shoes on the ground because it's so hot.
Sure.
And this is, from what I understand, right now we're going through the weather scenarios, and then after that we're going to have a massive bug invasion. Then after that there's supposed to be a water event, and then when people are so sick of the water event, we're going to enter into tens of years of drought.
Which all lines up with what Revelation tells us, and so I remember as a kid, my mom, naturally, I mean, we've all been looking for Jesus to come back for forever. You know what I mean? I'm 45 years old.
The end is here.
Yeah. And the scary thing is people like me, I personally, off of what I feel in my spirit, I know he's coming, but I know Christians right now that are devout Christians. They go to church every Sunday and they're witnessing and telling people about Jesus. And you talk about the Lord coming back, and they're like, I've heard that my whole life. I don't think it'll happen in our lifetime, And whether it happens in our lifetime or not, we are in the times of the birthing pains of it happening. It's beginning. The Bible definitely talks about, the fig tree, you'll not be able to tell the seasons and things like this. I remember as a kid, we had snow in March and April, not, and this is in Alabama, not summertime weather in March and April. And by Halloween time, it was freaking cold outside, and now at Halloween time, most of the time you might get some rain, but it's not really cold, It doesn't really get cold here in the South anymore until December, January.
And really the past 5 years, Christmas morning has been 75, 80 degrees for us, which is weird. It is so weird.
And I do get that, seasons change and they can blame it on global warming all they want to. But I think when you begin to dive into the scripture and you begin to look at the map that God gave us, and I do understand that the King James Bible is fallible. It was written by a man. If I was the king, I would have written it the way that nothing in that scripture would have made me look bad personally. But that is what we have to go by if we're not willing to dig into the Greek and the Hebrew and the Aramaic. And the things that I have studied in that tend to line up, especially when you get into Revelation, you get into Daniel, you get into Joel, all these different, Jude, all these different places that reference the end times. And, I think we're living in this, and I do know that I've heard some things on, in the 40s there was a treaty signed that you can't use a weapon of weather as war. That's why I asked you, do you think it's something natural happening and not man doing it? And then you've got all of the, the spraying of the chemtrails. If you believe that's real or not, that's up to you. I challenge you to go out on a bright, sunshiny day and look and see if the clouds don't make an X pattern and jet fuel dissipates. This stuff hangs around and just gets bigger. And I do believe that I've seen some evidence of the government coming out saying that they are actually spraying the atmosphere at times for different things. But then you get into this year, the great locust, all the cicadas that come out of the ground for the first time in I forget how many years. And then, just everything else in the world, you've got so many things that point back to the scripture and what it's telling us, but yet we want to turn a blind eye. And I know when I spoke earlier about having that vision, what I call a vision that day, I left work and I showed up at home and I remember nothing but what God showed me in between. And the Lord checked my spirit and said, this is the only beginning. And it was right at the beginning of the great pandemic. And him checking my spirit and saying, this is only a taste of what's to come, and dropped in my spirit that it would rear up again beginning of 23, and then it's going to kind of disappear. And there'll be something come along, but put emphasis in my spirit for 2027 to 2030. And I don't know what that means. I'm not saying that God told me he's coming back during that time or anything like that. But basically, be prepared that there are going to be some times of trials and tribulations during this time period. And it all started with 21, and that's just, I don't know, it's kind of crazy, but the Bible specifically tells us that the earth will groan, it will cry out. There will be destruction in the earth. And I think that we are living in the scariest time, but also the greatest time if you look at it, because we're witnessing prophecy come to pass,
That's very true.
So what else can you tell us on this?
Well, as far as the chemtrails, before I moved up here, I was working in northern Illinois, about an hour outside of Chicago. So the O'Hare jetliners fly right over work, And I was outside, and it was a summer day, and it was particularly pretty muggy. You ever see those jetliners? It looks like they're doing 5 miles an hour, super low through the sky. It was doing that right over the building, and I'm looking at it because I could see rivets on the wings. It was pretty cool. And it flew past us. It was still low, and then all of a sudden, I heard this massive. It was a sprayers. I seen sprayers come on underneath the wings and on the back rudder wings, just come on, shoot out a big volume of white stuff, like it was priming it. And then I seen it shut off, and it wasn't fuel dumping, because you're not going to fuel dump at low altitudes like that,
Right.
But I seen the nozzles, I seen the the spray radiuses, everything. Then after it shut off, it throttled up and took up straight up in the air and then went off, So I think it was priming itself to spray. But what else could that be? I mean, there's nothing else. I seen it with my own eyes, so I know it's for real.
Right.
If you ever look at the clouds up in a sunny day, they're white or whatever. You put on some good sunglasses, maybe some polarized ones, you'll start seeing on the edges of clouds where the sun's going through, you'll see blue, green, and red. I got pictures of that all over the place, and those are the different colors of those nano metal particles I was telling you about. They spray in the air. So all the clouds are saturated with it. You can't even look at a blue sky and it being blue, it'll be a silver blue.
Yeah. And I know they talk about, cloud seeding and things like that, which is scary to think that you can do that and cause rain. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I'll tell you what, that's a HARP system. And right now, that's halfway operational because half the time it's broke down than it is more than functioning. They could seed a cloud and they can use that antenna array to superheat the ionosphere to get it to rain. But that's all they can do. They cannot manipulate or control weather or use it as a weapon. Half the time, the weather destroyed a lot of those bases. So obviously they're not in control of that.
Yeah, so that's what I had read was HARP. HARP was the thing that the treaty was signed on in the 40s or the 50s or whatever that they couldn't use for weapons of mass destructions or whatever. But then you get into the wildfires and stuff that's happening. I watched a video up in Canada, I believe it was up in Nova Scotia, where 6 or 7 different fires all started at one time. They're taking video from a satellite, and all these fires, you just see the smoke all happen at once, and they're miles and miles apart, but yet it was supposedly all the same fire.
Mm-hmm.
Then you got, the fires in Hawaii and different places like that. And then you get into they shot it with a laser, and anything that was blue wasn't affected by, I don't know about all that. I don't want to sit here and sound like a conspiracy nut, but here's the thing about a conspiracy. Not all conspiracies are true, but there's truth to all conspiracies. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that, if we sit back and we think that even though we live in the greatest country in the world, in my opinion, if we think that the people that are on Capitol Hill have our best interest at heart, we're crazy, because with power, with power comes greed. It takes over, and you want to be in full control. And the best way to gain full control is by making the people that you're trying to control think that you are not in control. And it's just a great deception,
Well, I know one thing, like with Hawaii and people thinking that maybe some satellite lasers started fires there, because there is Oprah Winfrey out there helping people get property, and other rich people were buying up property or forcing some of the people who were native there to give up their land. So something political or whatever was going on with that during a crisis, because I've always heard, make the best out of a crisis from these kind of people. But if it was a laser from space and, the thing, it didn't affect blue, this, that, whatever, you would be talking more like a diode type laser, which could be blue or green, and sure, under those circumstances, anything blue would not be affected by that. But if they were to use stuff like up in space or some of the naval ships, they don't have diode lasers. They're kind of a small grade scenario. So that's why I rule out lasers for Hawaii with the blue scenario, because they got chemical lasers or CO2 lasers, and they can cut through thick steel like instantly, pretty bad. So I really don't see that that's being the fact. There's been a phenomenon that has occurred in the Arctic region up north of us, and it was in the early 2000s. I know 2004 was one date, and I don't know if 6 or 8 was the other. But either way, some people were up there and got into an area where they were instantly cooked from the inside out, like in seconds. So they had to quarantine those areas off. Not many people are up there anyway, but they definitely made sure no one else could get into those areas. So the reason for that being is that we're talking about celestial mechanics and what the sun's doing to Earth. Some parts of the magnetic field could have holes in them before it'll finally collapse, and it's been known that's been known to have happened. And if you had a special lens, let's say, and you can look at the energy coming off the sun onto our planet, you would see some of those energies we concentrated in like straws. There'd be like 9 or 10 straws coming down widespread. And that'll be a super high focus concentration of some of the energy from the sun. And in the case with the Arctic, these people ended up walking into a period where there was an area where there was no magnetic field and one of these straws hit them. And they literally cooked from the inside out, like totally dead in seconds. And I believe what's happening with these wildfires is the same thing. There's parts of the magnetic field that got weak enough where more stronger radiation came through and would set houses and stuff on fire. In the future, even with the way our magnetic field is, it'll be highly possible that your rooftop would just catch on fire just from the sunlight itself. I mean, that's how, the world's going to burn. There's going to be a lot of fires.
Sure.
And I can't emphasize that enough. Like, I live in a place where there's a forest, and one of the biggest issues I've seen, like the wildfires in Hawaii and all that, even the police department or rescue teams, they had booklets on how to help people. Half of them didn't even read it, and they didn't know what to do, and people got stuck in areas and couldn't get out and burned to death. So if I was anyone, if you live in a wooded area, not in the city or whatever, I would look at where you live and find the best routes and have alternate routes off of that of where you can go, because those things are nothing to play with. I mean, you can be 300-500 yards from a burning forest and you'll feel 1,800 degree temperatures.
Yeah.
You can't even stand there. So I would strongly suggest anyone who lives in the forest to definitely map out ahead of time locations where you can go to escape forest fires.
Well, that's just definitely a good thing to, I guess, to have a plan of escape regardless. You know what I mean? Because anything could happen.
Yeah.
Fires, or whether it be an attack or whatever, you know what I mean? It's good to know your area and a way to be able to get out safely, get your family out safely, have you some supplies, weapons, whatever you need, But I do know, watching videos of these wildfires and people trying to get out in their cars. I mean, you're not safe in a car. You think you are, but I mean, your tires are going to melt. The car's going to overheat. There's a lot of things. So having an escape route is definitely something that people should look at anyway, regardless of where you live. You know what I mean? Just because you never know what kind of a tornado is a big enough disaster for you to need to have some sort of safety plan, escape plan. So, well, anything else you want to go?
Oh, yeah. And so getting back into that, you mentioned the word tornado. And I was talking to you about atmospheric river conditions. So the whole weather phenomena is going to be categorized totally different. Like, you have categories for tornadoes and for hurricanes. So now we're going to end up having categories for rainfall, categories for floods, categories for wind speeds, categories for lightning, and categories for hail. All of those things, because everything is going up exponentially, they're all going to have different categories. So that's why I'm saying weather is going to become man's worst enemy in the near future.
So is this something that you're just studying and researching on your own, or have you talked to anybody, in the field professionally?
Oh, no, up here, there's not, I don't live in a wide, community type area. It's kind of widespread,
Sure.
So meeting people is like, it is what it is. But I have a source where I'm not going to identify who or what it is,
Sure.
but I do have a source that I get information from. And then I also, because I'm aware of the information, I can also research against it through other people who research things.
Sure.
And in the beginning, there wasn't much, but now today there's a few different podcasters or even in peer reviews at universities. That's where you can get some true information, before it gets, sometimes mainstream will take it and run with it because they have to disclose some things real quick and now it's gone. But yeah, that's where I compare a lot of stuff. And even like from my own personal experience, um, coming like up here in Wisconsin where I live, every year, minimum 3 feet of snow. We have massive tourists that come up here that pay for a lot of the remote because we don't have much manufacturing and stuff. So their economy depends on tourists. So every year it's been that way. Temperatures in the winter during the deep freeze between -20 and -50 below, that's all normal here. Last year, we might have had the most amount of snowfall was 4 inches.
Wow.
Most of the time we didn't have snow cover. The coldest temp was 0. So there's places I know in the world that their climate has never changed. There's places next to it where there's records being set all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Eventually this is just starting. Eventually this will become everywhere. So
Become
some
the
people will be like, yeah, it's not getting warmer or whatever, but give it time. I guarantee you, everyone's gonna have to deal with this situation.
Well, I can definitely, whether I'm a skeptic or not, I can definitely say that there's definitely some truth to this just because of the simple fact of today being late June.
Mm-hmm.
It's 104 degrees feels like outside in Alabama today, and then last week we had the same record temperatures in June, and I was in Dallas, Texas, the end of May, beginning of June, and two hottest days on record in history in Dallas, Texas in freaking May and June. And I know that happens, but it's starting to definitely happen more and more frequently every single year, as we go on. And there's got to be something behind it, I know the Bible says that the Lord, will never destroy the earth with water again, but it also does say that it will end with fire.
That's right.
He will destroy it with fire. So what you're saying to me makes sense. When you get into the droughts and the bugs and the fire and all that, how much closer are we coming to the return to the end? You know what I mean?
I can give you a clue to some type of a timeline thing. I wouldn't say biblically, but with the weather going on, from what I understand, like we're talking about the magnetic field weakening and all that. So you guys all heard about pole shift and that our magnetic north is moving east, on a gradual basis. So, from what I've heard, uh, our planet is because of the core slowing down because it's over the energy from the sun is overactive and it's actually slowing the core down. The Earth is going to end up tilting. I think it was 26 degrees or something like that. And from what I understand, the equator by halfway through 2026 is going to move several thousand miles north. And what that says is that it's going to end up going across our country, in a loop around the planet and other countries where it's never been before. So as far up north into the northern hemisphere the equator is going to go, it'll cover up to where Kentucky is. Imagine the equator to the world is in Kentucky instead of somewhere in South Africa,
Yeah.
And some of the effects of that too is you got the standard trade winds that come out of the west and they go to the east. When it changes from the east and it goes to the west, then you can say the lower half of the southern states in our country is going to turn into a desert eventually, like Florida, Georgia, the Carolinas, Louisiana, parts of Texas, will all turn into a desert. And right now, rain is hitting Arizona big time. Arizona is going to change into like a temperate forest. So everything that we know how things are is going to, the surface of the earth is going to change tremendously just from the weather alone, not to mention anything from celestial effects. So it's quite an eye opener. Where I'm seeing the processes now, you can just go on YouTube and type in flooding and look all around the world, places you never see floods before, flooding out big time.
Well, I don't doubt what you're saying there,
right.
but part of me is like, are we seeing that? And this is me playing devil's advocate. Are we seeing these things just because there is so much out there? Like, has this been going on and we just didn't have the resources as far as video, everybody having a camera to film with? Or is this actually happening? And, in my personal opinion, I think it's actually happening. But I have to ask that question,
I'm glad you did.
or are we seeing it just because there's more? It's like yellow car syndrome. You never see a yellow car until you see a yellow car, then they're everywhere. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Here's one thing you always see in any videos, pictures, movies, or in a book, whatever your information source is, you always see the Middle East is a desert. They don't get rain. They don't get tornadoes. And now we're seeing flooding there and we're seeing tornadoes. That's one clue. But if you really want to know, this is pretty interesting. Obviously, a lot of agencies that are funded by the government are limited to expressing things they find, especially when it comes to a truth, which would pertain to a past, which they keep hidden. So in archaeology, many, many, many times, they've dug down and found the deeper you dig down the earth, the older civilizations you'll find. And most of the times, the only type of what you'll find in those civilizations would be just things made out of stone. And when you analyze that stone, you realize that everything seemed to have been burnt to a crisp. So another thing they don't mention to you about in that field is the tablets they find as well. And a lot of them state in those burnt up old civilizations to forsake all the worldly goods and false gods and worship the only one true God. A lot of these old temples have animal characters, and that's usually what they use for calendars for specific time dates and stuff. And they went through extraordinary measures to carve out those images on those calendars on stone because they know that will last. Because they went through what we're going through now, and they were trying to warn future generations of this situation. This is a for real deal when you look at all that stuff. The newest stuff they found out in Turkey, that Tebeki, whatever that's called, ancient ruins, and it happened to be buried, and they uncovered it, and they said it looked like they buried it for some reason, and no one can figure that out. Well, though that calendar was presenting a timeline, and they were trying to warn people way in the future about this event that takes place. And even on those columns that they have, you can see all the different, fish and different animals that are carved on there. And they're trying to give you a date of when this is going to reoccur because they knew about this kind of stuff back then. Ancient technology, today's technology and stuff we have, that's all from back in the past in ancient technology. We didn't create stuff like science said. We just reinvented it.
Well, and there's been that in the pyramids, here we are, however many thousands of years later, and we still can't figure out how they built the pyramids, you know what I mean? And why they built, and that they were obviously built for specific purposes that have to do with different things, but the thought, I don't care, you've got a billion Hebrew slaves, I still don't see them moving those giant stones. You know what I mean?
No.
And especially stacking them on top of one another. Now, maybe they did, I don't know, but yeah, it's, I definitely think history does repeat itself, and maybe God is just trying to give us all ample opportunity to listen and heed what he's saying, but yet for some reason we're stupid humans and we can't grasp it, put it in front of us, man.
Can I squeeze one tiny thing in real fast?
Yeah, man, go ahead.
Okay, so the ultimate question is, why is the sun doing this? So when you look at anything out in space with the best stuff we have in science, you can see, billions of galaxies and everything else. A lot of the solar systems always have binary star systems. They have two suns. Ours is unique and rare because we only have one sun up until recently. They found out that we do have a binary sun, and it's on a is extremely long elliptical orbit. So this is what these ancient civilizations were warning about, this sun coming back around. This is what's happening because of it. If you understand the physics out in space, when you have a large mass, it could affect other stuff, and there's gravitational pulls and whatnot. But the reason why the sun is overacting is because there's another sun on its way that's coming here soon. And with that sun is also another solar system with planets, and those planets also have moons. And all that's coming to us. So this is what I believe is going to be the end times. And a lot of cataclysmic events are going to take place from that. But that is the sole reason why the sun's heating up and why all the planets in our solar system's heating up. They've even seen our planets being tugged, every one of them, by something outside our solar system. And that's this massive amount of this other sun and all of its planets and everything as well. But you'll find that in science. They're just not admitting it.
Well, I was going to say, let's take that a step further and look at it biblically. So the earth is destroyed by fire, but there will be a new heaven and a new earth. So what if this additional sun and solar system is, you know what I'm saying? Like there's a logic for me being a Christian and looking at it biblically. There's a logic to that.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Not just scientific evidence or whatever, but there's logic to it. Maybe that's part of the Creator's plan, is to usher one out to bring the new in. We wonder how's there going to be a new heaven, a new earth. You know what I mean?
Well, and that kind of goes back, what was it? The Pharisees back in Jesus' time, they thought that Christ was going to be this whole different thing than what he really was.
Sure.
And that's kind of like, I think how a lot of us think. We think, okay, the new heaven, new earth is just going to be boom, here it is. Where in reality, it may just be this right here.
Yeah.
I mean, it may be different than the way we think it's going to be.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
What's really amazing is, every cell in your body, your cell has components to do what it does to function, to survive and live. All those components in your cells have the same exact ratios as the planets in our solar system does. And that'll tell you that there is truly a designer creator around.
Absolutely.
Oh, absolutely. 100%, man. 100%. Well, brother, we're going to end it right here, man. I would love to have you back on and go a little deeper if you've got more.
Yes, I'd love to be back and talk about many other things.
Okay. Right. Sounds good.
It's been an honor and a privilege to be here.
Yeah, man, absolutely. We appreciate you doing it, man. And we will, I'll be in touch with you, man, and look at our recording schedule and see when we can have you back on, man. I'd like to fit you back into this season of season 2 of our show if we can. So, yeah, awesome, man. Good stuff. I appreciate it very much. And that's it, I guess, for now. Yeah, we'll be in touch, man, for sure.
All right. Thanks, Steven. Thank
you, guys. May the Lord keep you.
Yeah. Wow. So interesting stuff.
It was
stuff I've never thought about. He's definitely smarter guy than I am, for sure.
Absolutely.
So yeah, that was Steven Seagull. I will put his information in the description if he's good with that. So if you guys got any questions, yeah, you got any questions?
I mean, I'll be honest, I didn't know where this video was going to go, or this podcast, but man, it's been good.
Well, I'd spoke to him on the phone, and right off the bat, of course, I mean, you're always skeptical, you know what I mean, with anybody that you're interviewing, especially on topics like this, you know what I mean? Because it's not something I'm very well versed in. It's definitely something I'm interested in, you know, but you got to get into the aspect of, what's real, what isn't. I spoke to him for about an hour and a half on the phone a few weeks ago, and it was just like talking to you, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And he kind of went into some of this, and I'd ask him, well, what is it that you want to talk about? And he said, I'd really like to talk about the celestial mechanics. I didn't understand why he wouldn't want to discuss the cryptids, but it makes sense to me now. So,
yeah, absolutely.
So, well, all right, guys, we're going to wrap it up here. We appreciate everybody tuning in. If you haven't yet, go to YouTube at Among the Ashes Podcast. Give us a like, a follow, a subscribe there. Also, you can find us on Spotify. If you would, go follow us there, as well as Apple Podcast, Amazon Podcast, iHeartRadio.
Audible.
You can also check us out on Facebook and on Instagram, TikTok, all at Among the Ashes podcast. We appreciate you guys. We love you. Remember, keep your heads up. Jesus loves you as well. And Romans 8:31, if God be for you, who can be against you? And we'll see you next time.